Thank you, and welcome to this year's Developer Tools session. So today we're going to start with a quick overview of all the tools we provide for app development. And then we'll take a deeper look at three of those tools and the updates we've made to them in the last year. Then we'll talk a little bit about some case studies we did in the spring on using the tools on real world apps and what that taught us. And then we'll see a demo of the new version of Roku Resource Monitor and its new features. And then we'll spend the remaining time after that answering your questions. And with that in mind, here is the Slido QR code for this session. So if you have questions to submit, scan this now, and I'll put this up again at the very end. Okay, let's get started. So developer tools actually encompasses quite a lot. So we maintain a set of tools to help with supporting your app throughout its entire life cycle. And that includes tools for design and development, like Rail, the Roku Advanced Layout Editor, and the unit test framework. It also includes tools for debugging and performance monitoring, like Roku Resource Monitor and the BrightScript Profiler. There are also tools for quality assurance, like the channel automation framework and the stream testing tool. And then there are tools for code analysis and channel certification, like the static analysis tool and the deep link tester. And in addition to all that, we also maintain some other frameworks and libraries to help enable efficient development of Roku apps, like SGDex or Scene Graph Developer extensions. So this is a more visual look at that collection of tools. Today, we're going to be focused on three of them. They are Roku Resource Monitor, BrightScript Profiler, and the debug protocol. Okay, so let's talk about those three and what we've done to them in the last year. So since Dev Summit 23 a year ago, we've been very focused on Roku Resource Monitor. That is the tool that we get the most feedback on, and the developers seem to get the most value out of. So we've been very focused on that, especially in terms of stability and reliability, and that goes for all the tools. We also spent a lot of time working on the debug protocol this year, with the same things in mind, with stability and reliability in mind. In addition to those sort of basic stability improvements, we also added object allocation and improved rendezvous monitoring to RRM in 3.0, and version 3.1, which we'll see a demo of in a minute, builds on those and makes them even more useful. The partner app evaluation is the case studies I mentioned a minute ago, and we'll get into detail on that in a minute. And what we did there was we picked a handful of very popular apps on the platform and decided to ourselves take the tools, point them at these channels, and just see what we could learn. And then finally this year, in the spring, we deprecated all of the web-based versions of the tools. So going forward, all the tools will be desktop only, no more web versions. Okay, Roku Resource Monitor. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Roku Resource Monitor is our visualization tool. It can help you track and visualize all kinds of things that are going on the device while your channel is running. Things like system and graphics memory, CPU usage, rendezvous activity, registry usage. It'll show you the firmware beacons. These are the beacons that the firmware fires to indicate things like channel start or media playback, startup and shutdown. It can also give you information about the number of scene graph nodes your channel is using. So in a minute, we'll see a demo of version 3.1 of RRM. which adds cumulative rendezvous over the course of an entire session, as opposed to just the polling period snapshots that you get in 3.0. We've also added object allocation by thread. So again, 3.0 added object allocation, 3.1 builds on that and breaks that information out by thread within your app. And then we also added a background throttling setting to the app. This is a performance setting for the tool itself. And again, you'll see that in the demo. And in the last year, since last time we talked, we added those object allocations to the app. We also added the ability to turn individual graphs on and off. To me, this is a big deal. This is one of my favorite features. I use it all the time. And I'll talk about it in the demo, but it actually it's a way for you to help reduce the performance impact of profiling a channel on the device itself, especially if you're using a less powerful device. And then we also added the ability to synchronize the scroll bars across all the graphs. So if you have several graphs going and you drag that slider left and right through time, you can have all of the graphs snap to the position you scroll to so that all the graphs stay lined up in the time direction, which is super handy. Okay, BrightScript Profiler. So again, for those of you who may not be familiar with the tool, Profiler is our visualization and tracking tool for system memory and CPU specifically. And I know your first thought is, but doesn't RRM do that? And yes, RRM does that, but Profiler takes it to a whole new level of granularity. So while RRM will show you a pretty graph of the CPU and memory usage of your channel overall at a point in time, Profiler lets you dive much deeper into that data and see CPU and memory data on a function by function level, or even if needed, a line by line level. So you can see the amount of CPU and memory being used by a single line of BrightScript code. In the last year, since Dev Summit 23, we have improved the stability and reliability of Profiler, which is a bigger deal than it sounds like. If you were using Profiler a year ago, I think you would say that it probably wasn't our best piece of work. We've really focused this year on making this tool more stable and more reliable. And I think we've done a pretty good job of it. Okay, the third and final tool we're looking at closely today is the debug protocol. So the debug protocol gives you the ability to debug your app by doing things like setting breakpoints and stepping through individual lines of program execution. And in the year since we last talked, we, again, as with the other tools, have enhanced the stability and reliability of the tool. We did a lot of work on improving the execute command. So if you were using the tool before and you were running a lot of execute commands in quick succession, you probably noticed it was pretty slow. So in fact, it was 1 per second. So if you had a queue of 10 execute commands you wanted to run, it took 10 seconds. And now it is much, much faster. We've dramatically improved that delay. We've also hardened the conditional breakpoint support, which goes along with the reliability and stability goals for the year. And we made several improvements to the protocol to help support the Visual Studio Code plugin. And you'll hear more about that in the community tools session. Okay, case studies. So earlier this year, we decided to just pick some very popular apps on the platform and point the tools at them and just see what they told us. We had no sort of hard goals in mind. We just were curious, what can we learn using our own tools on some of these very popular apps? And it turns out we learned a fair amount, and we were able to take that information back to those partners with ideas for them, ways that they could improve their apps on the platform. We also incorporated the things we learned into a webinar a few months ago. So if you want to see the nitty-gritty details of this, I encourage you to go look at that. I will go through the sort of high-level findings right now. I can't speak to what we found in individual apps, but I can share some general concepts that we learned. The first is moving data around. So we found that a lot of apps are moving a lot of data from thread to thread when they don't necessarily need to. And that's bad because it causes very long rendezvous, and very long rendezvous block the render thread, which causes a poor user experience. So the lesson there was to sort of minimize the amount of data you're passing through rendezvous. And in particular, when you're building a tree of content nodes, try to keep them as small as possible. Don't put any unnecessary information in those trees that are going to be passed back to the render thread through a rendezvous. Another rendezvous related behavior we found that was not great was, and we saw this primarily in analytics and ad related logic, where there would be an event loop, and every time through the event loop, the code would access a field on a video node, but that video node was owned by the render thread. So if you're in a task node accessing a field on the video node, which is owned by the render thread, every single time through that loop, there was a rendezvous happening to get that data. And there are strategies to avoid that rendezvous that we talk about in that webinar. Better childcare. This is about building those trees of content nodes again. And the actual BrightScript and SceneGraph APIs that you use to do it. It's sort of a create child versus append child versus update discussion. And there is no one right answer for this. It depends on your situation and what kind of tree you're trying to build. But in that webinar, we go through all of the different when it's right to use each of those different approaches. Allocation audit. We watched the object allocation in these apps, and some of them did some unexpected things like allocating an object every time through a loop, when really you could have just allocated a single instance of it outside the loop and then reused it each time through, which would have saved a little memory. There were no major problems caused by this, but it was something we noticed, and so we wanted to share it. All right, so now we'll see about a 10-minute demo of RRM 3.1 and the new features that it brings to the table. Okay, here we are in Roku Resource Monitor 3.1. I already have the tool connected to my device and set up to profile Roku Media Player, which I have sideloaded on that device. The first thing I want to show you is that new background throttling setting. So I'm going to go up here to the settings menu, and in the general section, if I scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see there's a new toggle that says use background throttling. And when this is on, what happens is if you move the tool itself, Roku Resource Monitor, to the background on your desktop or laptop machine, it will use fewer system resources while it's in the background. So if you have a very long test going and you want to move Resource Monitor to the background so you can do other work in the meantime, with this setting on, Roku Resource Monitor will use fewer of your system resources during that time that it's in the background. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is turn off some of these graphs. So for this demo, all we're really interested in is rendezvous and object allocations. So I'm going to turn everything else off using this icon here that looks like an eye. And then you'll see when I turn it off, the chart dims out. And then I can take it a step further, and I can also collapse the graph with this caret icon. Okay, and I'm going to do that to everything we're not interested in. And besides reducing the visual clutter, another benefit of this is that if a graph is turned off, the tool will not pull the device to get data for that graph. So there will be less impact on the performance of the device itself as you're running your test. Oh, we do want rendezvous. My bad. Okay. So we have rendezvous and we have the two object allocation graphs. So with that, I'm going to start a new session and start navigating around Roku Media Player. Load in some data. There we go. Start playing some music. Okay. So that should be a good amount of data. So I'll stop the session. Take this back out to the main screen. Okay. So let's get this out of the way. So in the rendezvous chart, the new feature in 3.1 is what we call cumulative rendezvous. So if I click into one of these, maybe this one here, you'll see in the hover, you can see that dot represents 30 rendezvous that took a total of 18 milliseconds. But if I drill into it, I can now see these two new columns called cumulative events and cumulative duration. And that's cumulative since I started the session. So in the time that I started the session, for instance, this first rendezvous that happens on line 11 of content screen, content handler. In this particular sample that I've drilled into, that rendezvous happened 2 times for a total of 2 milliseconds. In the total time since I started the session, that rendezvous has happened 4 times and taken a total of 2 milliseconds, which probably means a couple of them were really fast. I can also sort these, so I can sort by cumulative duration. Let's do that. So, and that immediately tells us that this particular rendezvous right here that's happening on line 8 of this content handler has caused a total of 6 rendezvous that took a total of 9 milliseconds. And that, at least at this point in time, remember, the one I clicked into happened about 8 seconds into the session. So at that point in time, this line has been the overall biggest offender, but it only accounts for 9 milliseconds worth of rendezvous, so that's actually not bad at all. So let's try a different one. Let's go down here to about 23 seconds into the session. And you can see this dot represents 33 rendezvous that took a total of 99 milliseconds. Let's click on that, and let's do the same thing. We'll sort by cumulative duration. And here now we have a different top offender. So previously it was this one, the line 8 one. And now we have a different one happening on line 11 of the same file that over the course of the entire session has caused 6 rendezvous that took a total of 60 milliseconds, so about 10 milliseconds each, which is not bad, but of all the rendezvous that are happening in Media Player during this session, this is the worst one. During this particular, this is interesting, so during this particular polling period at the 23-second mark, there was one rendezvous on that line that was 45 seconds long, which means that the other 5 represented in this cumulative number took a grand total of 15 milliseconds. So that could be a hint that this most recent rendezvous caused by this line of code is for some reason worse than the others, right? There were 5 rendezvous before this that took a total of 15 milliseconds, and now the 6th one has, for some reason, taken 45 milliseconds. So that might be something worth digging into to try and figure out what's going on. So that's cumulative rendezvous. The other big new feature in 3.1 is object allocation by thread. So this graph is going to look very similar to 3.0. This is overall object allocations during the time period. But what's different is if I go up here and say filter by thread, it's now going to give me the option to only show object allocations that were caused by a particular thread. So I'm going to turn them all off, and I'm going to turn on only this content screen content handler thread and see what happens. Okay, so this shows us a couple of things. That content handler is a task. It's a task node, and so immediately we can see that that task node was only doing anything for 3 polling periods, or in this case, roughly 3 seconds, because I have the polling interval set to 1 second. So the task node was only running for about 3 seconds. During those 3 seconds, it allocated 81 BrightScript objects. Right? And I just like in 3.0, I can click on this and see the individual breakdowns by top 10, or I can see absolutely everything that it allocated. Okay, so let's change that up. Let's change constant screen, turn that off, and now let's look at the main BrightScript thread. That's this guy. Run user interface is the main BrightScript thread. So let's see what it's doing. Not a whole lot, which is not unexpected for a channel like Roku Media Player, which does most of its work in the scene graph render thread and in various task threads. So the render thread the main thread is very flat. It allocates a grand total of 14 BrightScript objects. So there's not a whole lot going on there, and that is expected for this channel. Okay. Let's do one more. Let's turn that off. Let's look at the audio player screen. Let's see what it was doing. So we should expect that it would not become active until the very end of the session when I started playing content. And yep, right around 22 seconds is when I started playing content. And it allocated exactly one BrightScript object. You can select multiple. So I can select, let's say I can select the button bar and the USB logic, right? And now I can see that's an interesting graph. How this grows over time is pretty interesting. And you can see it's allocating, it looks like mostly associative arrays, which is not terribly unexpected. The logic that reads the USB drive is probably doing most of that. And object allocation tracking by thread also works in line mode, also works in horizontal mode. So that's a quick look at object allocation tracking by thread, rendezvous, cumulative count and cumulative duration, and of course the background throttling setting that we looked at the beginning. All right, so there you have it. That's RRM 3.1 and its new features. Here is the Slido QR code again. If you have questions for the Q&A portion, go ahead and scan this. And with that, we will move into the Q&A session. Thank you.
Let's send it. All right. Great presentation by Chris. All right, let's get started. We got lots of questions in the Slido. So from Lucas, he asks, I noticed running a channel using the profiler makes it extremely slow. For example, after setting all the manifest entries as per the documentation. Great presentation by any advice on improving this?
I can take this first, and I'm sure those will have input on it. Um, for the profiler being very slow, we are putting out very frequent updates now that will continue to improve the performance. With respect to manifest entries, I don't have anything that you can tweak right now. We are going to make the profiler much more responsive as you'll see over the next few months. That is a strong area of focus for us.
You can adjust the sampling rates in your manifest, which should improve the profiler performance quite a bit. That's documented on the SDK docs website.
Yeah, you can
So
also
we can,
turn line level profiling on and off. So I would say only use line level when you really need it.
Cool. Excellent. Great responses. Um, David asks, are there any plans for tools to help developers manage channel assets more efficiently?
Um, I have actually a counter question to David on this. I would like to hear more about what his thoughts are around asset management and what he's struggling with so that we can take that back internally. If David would not mind coming on and or sharing more on Slido.
Yeah. David, you can, if you want to put more, expand on that in Slido, that'd be great. Then we can come back to you, come back to your question. Regarding crash analytics, are there plans for a more comprehensive crash reporting system built into the Roku platform?
Well, there are no concrete plans at the moment, but we hopefully you're taking advantage of what's already there. So we do have crash reports available to you in our developer portal. Um, I'd be interested in hearing what else you'd like to see there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
Steve.
also in terms of what's available now, there's RO system log also, and the video node has several fields related to error reporting.
Also, when your channel restarts, we now tell you your prior exit code. It's not really the crash reporting, but you do have a clear why your channel was terminated or exited the last time that you can get on next restart as well.
Excellent. And Stevie, if there's any like requests for enhancements or feature requests, you can put those in the developer Slack channel. So, all right, next question. Any chance we'll see some official Roku plugins for Visual Studio Code soon?
On this, we can't talk about future work, but I will say that we are very committed to supporting our community, and especially we work very closely with Brownlee and Chris Perkins. Big shout out to them on the Fubo team for all the work they do to support existing plugins, and we are trying to make the existing plugin much more efficient, especially on debugger. I noticed this other question later on that the debugger is not showing the speed that they expect. Some of it will be in the current version of the plugin, some of it will be in the next version of the plugin. And it also depends on what exactly you're doing with the debugger. But we are trying to be as efficient as we can in supporting the existing community effort so that your developer experience improves really quickly.
Excellent. All right. In the query app UI ECP command, we are able to see all the separate nodes for each item in a component like markup grid. However, in the layout editor, we can't. Is there any chance of seeing those nodes in a future version of the layout editor?
Excellent feedback. We will take that and look into it.
I think this is my favorite question so far. When can we expect 3.2 of RRM? And what do you want to add into that release and release after that? First of all, just to let everyone know that we released the Roku Resource Monitor 3.1 this morning. So you can take a look at the developer blog and to see the new features, and you can download the updated tool. And to that would also, hey, we just released 3.1. Yeah, but that's great. We're so excited. You guys are looking forward to the next iteration. And I'll let Ram expand further on maybe what could be in there, although we typically don't talk about future enhancements, but maybe there's some focus areas we can talk about.
Chris did a great job plugging 3.1, and I'm going to like reiterate that, and I'm going to let Kevin talk about features, whatever he wants to cover. In 3.1, there are three key features. One is turning on and off graphs that you're not using. This will really help your debugger experience with RRM because your system will be much more responsive when you're not polling for graphs that you're not using. That's a huge performance improvement. We use it all the time. The second thing is calling out which rendezvous are generating the most amount of time delay in your app is a new feature. If you go to the rendezvous graph, you can look at cumulative times, and that is a huge value. I know that we've actually showcased that to some partners already. And actually we got lots of questions about when is it coming out. Well, it's now out in RM 3.1. The third thing is object counts. You can use the object counts graph, and if you click on show object allocations by task thread, you can quickly see which of your task threads is holding on to the most amount of memory. So if you're debugging a memory leak, or if you're debugging which of your various threads is using the most resources, this is a very quick way to find out, especially if you're integrating third-party libraries into your app, because you know what your app is doing. You don't know what your partner apps are doing. So now when you turn this on, you can see which task thread is using the most amount of memory, and you have much better handle on reducing the resources that you're using or conserving the resources you're using and making your app snappy. So RM 3.1 is my favorite release of the year. I am excited it's out. I hope you guys have fun with it. And Kevin, take it away for anything else you want to talk about going forward.
Well, I really want to hear from the community what they're looking for. I have my favorite features, but we're not really sharing what those are yet. Hey, we just shared 3.1, so you just found out our latest features in 3.1. And I like RAM and very excited about what we've shared there. I think my favorite feature is the cumulative rendezvous time. I think that really helps target areas in your app to improve.
So, and by the way, feel free, like for sure for RM 3.2, put your feedback, your feature requests in the developer Slack. We take that input quite seriously, and many of the things that you see in this version of 3.1, that comes from feedback from the community. So please give us your thoughts, your opinions, the things you'd like to see, and you may see your feature requests incorporated in the next version of the tool. All right, moving on. Any plans to create a Roku device emulator tool? It's a tradition like no other. This gets asked every summit, and I'm surprised it actually took this long.
Well, and we still don't have one yet, and so it will probably continue to be asked until we have one. It's certainly something we're interested in as well. It's just a matter of can we economically do it, and doesn't, can we deliver something that is compelling? So
Fair enough. Moving on. Any chance Roku might combine one or more of the tools into one super tool?
I would say that's a direction that makes sense. We look at that as well.
Um, is there a way to see memory allocation for the largest BrightScript objects? For example, I see RO association array objects having largest count, but want to see which objects are contributing the highest.
Mm. Yeah, we can't look at individual allocations yet, but it's certainly something I think would be very useful as well. I mean, it's great to see the total counts, but I'd like to see the sizes, and I'd like to see, you know, individual allocations as well. But no roadmap of when we deliver on those things.
Okay. Debug performance was mentioned as working much faster than the past, sub 1 second. That has not been my experience. Each time one step, it is taking multiple seconds before returning.
It depends on what you're doing. And I'm going to shamelessly plug Brownlee Plum from Fubo for raising this to our attention. So it already has our attention. Um, I can't tell you about when or what or how we'll fix it, but this one is certainly in our crosshairs.
Yeah, if you're referring to the slide in the presentation where I said that, that is specific to the execute command in the protocol. So if you're doing other things, they might still be slow, but we are working on those things as well.
Excellent. John asks, is Roku planning on adding app launch initiate and app launch complete signal beacons to the Roku Resource Monitor? Ideally, it should take into account the app dialog beacons and give us accurate app launch times to ensure we are complying with these cert requirements.
Something else I can take and say that this is also something that we're looking at actively.
Cool. The next question I'm going to answer just with any plans for improvements for the BrightScript language itself. I think that question could go, if you come back, ask that in the scene graph panel later this afternoon, that'd be more appropriate. So it's so please, Vitaly, come back, ask that later. Instead of the Roku Resource Monitor displaying beacons and epoch times, could it display the times in millisecond durations? That would be much more useful.
Well, we'll take that as a feature request.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly
I
what
think-
I'm thinking.
I think the next one is oops. Hold on. Let me go here to this one. You have another sort of feature request. Could Roku allow the pop-up dialog windows to be resizable in the Roku Resource Monitor? There are times when we can't adjust the columns wide enough to view all the data.
Another good feature request. I do think it makes sense for you to be able to specify your own layout of the windows and save that.
Yeah, a lot of good feature requests.
But yeah, no way to do that today.
CI/CD improvements. Would love to see more, especially on remote teams.
I agree. Yeah, we could improve in how to use the tools in CI/CD.
How is Roku planning to improve or expand its developer documentation around tools as they keep evolving? Well, as the tools evolve, we'll keep putting out the documentation to support them to ensure that the tools are as easy to use and maximize adoption. And as you've seen this past year, that we've had a number of webinars around, for the Roku Resource Monitor releases, and we'll continue like any type of new feature or new tool. They're fully supported in docs, with webinars, with videos, whatever it takes to ensure that they're as easy to use as possible. How to get Roku device view in Visual Studio Code. I saw this in yesterday's Roku automation testing session. He was using this.
Jonathan, once we finish this question, I'd like to go back to that because I think you put in the moderator question about which specific tools for documentation. I'd like to hear about that too.
Sure. I'd have to go back and let me go through these. How is the render thread called in Roku Resource Monitoring filtering? I didn't see it during the demo. So how's the render thread called in the filtering?
You can click on the task nodes and see the various threads if that's what you're asking for.
I believe it'll have your scene name there, doesn't it, Chris?
I believe so. Yeah. So when you create the scene and give it a name, I think that's what it will show up as.
What is Roku's stance on helping us automate our build and deploy pipelines?
Well, I mean, we have tooling for um, the command line for installing on the device, side loading and all that, and it's really just automating the web interface. And when you put the box in developer mode, that's basically how it works. We've also had some feature requests on how to do it with the channel store and being able to upload your package to the channel store and submit for publishing on all that. And Tom Charles is working on those feature requests, and I don't think there's any timeline on us fulfilling those either.
Actually, so I've got the little information that actually those are in the early adopter stage right now. So we're just seeing how those features are working, and then we'll get them on to more general availability in the future. Okay. Oh, um, any ideas about the case with the debugger when you step into step over and it brings you to the event loop?
I think this might be a known issue. I've heard other people talk about that. Occasionally, when you do a step in or step over, it will momentarily jump to the wrong place, but then it will correct itself. So we're aware of that and looking at a fix.
Okay. Do any of the developer tools support filtering Roku devices on the local network automatically? Right now, I have to constantly input the IP address manually as it changes every few days based on my network.
I'm assuming you mean when, like, for example, fire up RRM, you have to put your list of favorite tools out there. We can consider that, but not sure. Other than spraying your network with requests, we have a more efficient way today of doing it. But we'll take this feature request into
We do have an efficient way of doing it, but I don't think that the tools are utilizing that right now. And it does depend somewhat on your network environment.
Yeah, the easy solution today, if you have the ability, is to just give the device a static IP.
There you go. So we've got a time for a few more questions before we get into the localization panel in 2 minutes. So let's just get a few more questions here. Are you guys planning to release some APIs for automated channels publishing instead of the developer dashboard? That way we can integrate it into our CI/CD pipeline. It's
Well,
same thing. It's in the, by the way, that's sort of an early adopter phase. So we are definitely working on that. And so it's early adopter, getting feedback on that, and then we'll roll it out to general availability in the near future. I'm going to answer this question. SceneGraph, what improvements on the horizon? Come back later this afternoon for the SceneGraph panel, and we'll be happy to answer it there. I'm going to answer this one too. Kevin, how do we give the feedback of what we want? Best place to put it is Tony has put it in the developer Slack channel. There is a channel there for your feature requests. We do scour that. We take that and we'll funnel it back to the engineers and our product staff and incorporate that into our roadmap. This will be the last question. In Roku Resource Monitor, once memory is used by nodes, it does not get released right away. Is there some way for us to either clear the memory up or know what is just cache memory instead? One thought was to try and use enough memory with a local object to force a clearing of that memory.
I'm not sure the question was completely clear. Did you say that are you concerned about the Roku Resource Monitor tool itself or the channel app memory usage?
It sounds like it's just about memories used by nodes does not get released. So it sounds like it's more about the scene graph objects. Daniel, if you want, you could expand more in the developer Slack, actually, or you can I'll ping you offline and try to get more feedback on this so we can address this offline.
Well, I think we should answer in the sense of how the scene graph application is managing memory and really they're reference counted. So when the node reference count goes to 0, then it should be cleaned up basically. Kevin,
There
do you
is
have any other
also,
comments on
The
that?
exception, it depends on whether you're talking about Roku Resource Monitor showing counts of scene graph objects, or if you're looking at the process memory. And we do have some known Roku OS situations where you might release scene graph nodes, but you might not see that memory uh, immediately shown in the process monitor as reduced memory use. So sometimes there are caches or fragmentation or things that do make it appear that the scene graph objects are taking memory after they're released. So we are aware of that.
But the
Awesome.
object counts will reflect your changes immediately. It's just that the total memory for the app may not change immediately because of fragmentation or other reasons.
Okay. Guys, thank you so much. This was a great session. Thank you all for participating. Thanks to our panel. And now we are going to move on to our panel on localization. Thank you so much. Enjoy.